Chapter 1 Whispers from the Old Hotel. In the heart of the old town of Eldridge Falls, hidden behind the veneer of crumbling brick and the shadows of neglected alleyways, stood the once grandiose Starlight Hotel. The hotel, now a husk of its former glory, was closed after a series of unexplainable incidents that had left the townsfolk murmuring about curses and hauntings. The tales were dismissed by many as mere urban legends, yet the hotel's windows, like darkened eyes, seemed to hold back secrets. Jonas, a young journalist with a penchant for the paranormal, had come to Eldridge Falls drawn by the stories he'd heard. Armed with a camera and a healthy dose of skepticism, he checked into the renovated part of the town, eager to uncover the truth behind the Starlight Hotel's eerie reputation. On a foggy evening, Jonas approached the hotel, its sign flickering as if struggling to maintain its last breath. The front door creaked ominously as he pushed it open, stepping into the dimly lit lobby where the air was thick with the must of decay. His flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and a grand staircase draped in cobwebs. "Hello." Jonas's voice echoed through the grand hall, met only by silence. He proceeded to the reception desk, where a guest register lay open, a thick layer of dust covering its last entries dated back to 1987. Flipping through the pages, he noticed a pattern of guests checking in but not checking out on the last recorded page. Chilled by the discovery, Jonas explored further, his footsteps cautious on the creaking floorboards. Each room he entered was a snapshot of abandonment, personal belongings strewn about as if left in a hurry. Cameras still loaded with film, diaries open with mid-sentence entries, a child's toy left forgotten on the floor. As night deep met outside, the atmosphere within the hotel grew oppressive, the air cooler and heavier. Jonas's rational mind tried to dismiss the feeling of being watched, but the sensation persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. Chapter 2 The apparition in room 313. Determined to make the most of his visit, Jonas headed towards room 313, the source of many stories he had uncovered during his research. It was said that in this room, guests reported seeing the apparition of a woman in a white gown, her face obscured by long, tangled hair, crying softly in the corner of the room. The door to room 313 was slightly ajar. Jonas pushed it open, and the musty smell of untouched air greeted him. He stepped inside, the beam from his flashlight glowing over the vintage furniture and a large, canopy bed shrouded in shadows. As he approached the window, overlooking the main street of Eldridge Falls, a sudden cold draft made him shiver. The temperature drop was sudden and unnatural. Jonas swung his flashlight around to the corner of the room where guests had reported the sightings. Nothing. He sighed, partly relieved, partly disappointed. But as he turned to leave, a soft sob broke the silence, stopping him dead in his tracks. His heart raced as he slowly turned back to the corner. There, illuminated by the beam of his flashlight, stood the figure of a woman, her face hidden by her hair, just as the stories had described. Frozen in shock, Jonas could only watch as the apparition raised her head, revealing hollow eyes that stared directly into his soul. The sobbing grew louder, turning into a wail that echoed off the walls, filling the room with sorrow and despair. Jonas stumbled backward, his mind reeling from the encounter. He raced out of the room, down the corridor, and back into the safety of the lobby. Panting and disoriented, he collapsed against the reception desk, his mind struggling to process what he had seen. As he regained his composure, the hotel seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening. A sense of urgency overcame him. He needed to leave, but not before finding out more about the woman and the hotel's dark secrets. Determined, Jonas returned to the guest register at the reception desk. As he flipped through the dusty pages, a small newspaper clipping fell out. It was an article about the hotel from the late 80s, detailing the mysterious disappearance of a young bride on her wedding night, last seen in room 313. The pieces began to fall into place, but Jonas knew there was more to the story. He needed to dig deeper, to uncover the connection between the apparition and the hotel's haunting history. As he prepared to delve further into the hotel's past, the air grew colder, and the faint sound of sobbing echoed through the halls once more. The night was far from over, and Jonas was about to discover that some legends are more than just stories. They are warnings. Chapter 3. The shadow in the hall. Jonas gathered his nerve and his gear, his journalist's curiosity now a roaring flame despite the flicker of fear that danced in his chest. He clutched the newspaper clipping as if it were a lifeline, linking the past to these ghostly manifestations. He needed to understand who the bride was and what had truly happened to her. Leaving the reception desk, he ventured deeper into the hotel. As he walked, the echo of his footsteps was swallowed by the pervasive silence that hung like a shroud over the Starlight Hotel. The air grew denser, the darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He made his way back to the second floor, his flashlight beam cutting through the blackness, casting long, ominous shadows. As he passed by the closed doors of each room, a profound sense of unease settled over him. It was as if the very walls were whispering secrets in a language too ancient and too terrifying for the human mind to grasp. When Jonas reached the staircase leading to the third floor, where room 313 awaited its secrets to be uncovered once more, a sudden movement caught the corner of his eye. He turned, shining his light down the long hallway. There was nothing but the dust-laden air and the peeling wallpaper. Yet, the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. Taking a deep breath, Jonas continued his ascent to the third floor. The air grew colder with each step, a cold that seeped into his bones. As he reached the top of the stairs, the temperature dropped so abruptly that his breath became a visible mist, clouding the beam of his flashlight. He walked the hallway to room 313 once again, the carpet muffling his steps, his heart pounding in his ears. This time, the door was closed, not as he had left it. Hesitating only for a moment, he pushed it open. The room was as he had left it, yet now, it was utterly freezing. Jonas's breath fogged before him as he stepped inside, the chill wrapping around him like a cloak. He went to the window, the same window where the apparition had first appeared. As he peered out into the night, he felt a presence behind him. Swinging around, his flashlight beam landed on the empty room once more. Yet, the feeling of another's gaze upon him persisted, chilling him more deeply than the air. Determined to find answers, Jonas set up a small digital recorder on the table beside the bed, hoping to capture any sounds or voices that might explain the paranormal activities. He spoke aloud, addressing the spirit directly. "I don't mean any harm. I'm just here to learn your story. Can you tell me what happened to you?" The silence that followed was oppressive, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Jonas waited, his recorder running, the only sound his own shallow breathing. Then, faintly at first, the sobbing began again. It was low, mournful, and full of an indescribable sorrow. Jonas felt a pang in his chest as the cries grew louder, more anguished. "Why are you crying? What happened here?" Jonas asked, his voice steady despite the fear that tightened his throat. The sobbing stopped abruptly, and the room temperature plummeted even further. Jonas's flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, he heard a whisper, his hair. The flashlight being returned, steadier now, and Jonas's eyes widened in horror. In the mirror across the room, a dark figure loomed behind his reflection. It was a shadow, dense and impossibly black, its form vaguely human but distorted and twisted in agony. Jonas turned around, his heart racing, but there was nothing there, no one in the room but himself. He looked back at the mirror, and the shadow was gone, as if it had never been. Shaken, he grabbed the recorder, stopping it with trembling hands, eager to leave before anything else could manifest. As he hurried out of the room, the temperature gradually returned to normal, the oppressive feeling lifting slightly. But the sensation of being watched never completely abated. Jonas knew he couldn't leave yet, not without answers. He needed to listen to the recording, to hear if the voice had spoken anything else, to understand who, or what, was haunting the Starlight Hotel. Back in the safety of the lobby, Jonas played back the recording. The sobbing was there, as were his questions. And then, after his last question, a faint, almost inaudible voice came through, chilling him to the bone with its clarity. "Don't trust the Watcher." Jonas paused the recording, his mind racing. Who was the Watcher? Was it the shadow in the mirror, the presence he felt following him, watching him? He needed to dig deeper, to explore the hotel's past more thoroughly. But first, he had to find out who the Watcher was, a term that made his skin crawl just speaking it aloud. With his heart pounding in his ears, Jonas made his way back to the dusty archives of the hotel lobby, where old newspapers, guest books, and records were stored. He sifted through the papers with a fervor, looking for any mention of a Watcher or any clue that might explain the cryptic message. Hours slipped by as he delved deeper into the history of the hotel, uncovering more about its owners, guests, and the tragic events that seemed to cluster around its existence like dark clouds. One article in particular caught his attention, a faded piece from the local newspaper dated back to 1954, which detailed a series of unexplained disappearances at the hotel. The article hinted at a figure known only as the Watcher, a nickname given by the townsfolk to someone they believed was responsible for the disappearances. According to local superstition, the Watcher was a guardian of the hotel's darkest secrets and would do anything to keep them hidden. Jonas' pulse quickened as he read, his mind racing to connect the dots. This Watcher could be the shadowy figure in the mirror, the presence he felt stalking him through the darkened halls of the hotel. Determined to learn more, Jonas decided to interview some of the older residents of Eldritch Falls, those who might remember the tales of the Watcher firsthand. Leaving the musty confines of the Starlight Hotel, he headed into the sleepy town, where the sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. His first stop was the local diner, a place known for its old-timer clientele. There he met Marlene, an elderly woman who had been a maid at the Starlight Hotel during the 1950s. Over a cup of coffee, she recounted her experiences in hushed tones, her eyes darting around as if fearing that someone might overhear. The Watcher was real, all right, she whispered, leaning closer. We all felt it. Always watching, always there in the shadows. Would see things move on their own, hear whispers in empty rooms. But no one ever saw him clearly. He was like a ghost, but darker, more sinister. Jonas listened intently, recording every word. Did anyone ever confront him? Do you know what he wanted? Marlene shook her head, her expression grave. Nobody dared. Those who tried, they didn't last long at the hotel. Some left, others just vanished. We learned to keep our heads down and stay out of the Watcher's way. But even after I left, I could still feel his eyes on me, as if he'd never really let go. Chilled by her words, Jonas thanked Marlene for her story and left the diner with more questions than answers. The identity of the Watcher remained elusive, but his influence was undeniable. Jonas knew he had to return to the hotel to confront this malevolent presence once and for all. As night fell, he drove back to the Starlight Hotel, the building looming ominously against the night sky. Armed with his camera, recorder, and a newfound resolve, Jonas re-entered the hotel, the weight of the darkness palpable as he crossed the threshold. He made his way to the grand staircase, pausing to set up his equipment. Then, with every nerve on edge, he called out into the darkness. "I know you're here. I've heard the stories. Show yourself. What are you protecting? Why haunt this place?" The silence that followed was suffocating, the hotel holding its breath. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows at the top of the stairs. It was indistinct at first, but as it moved closer, the outline of a man, tall and imposing, became visible. His features were obscured by darkness, but his presence was overwhelmingly powerful. Jonas held his ground, his heart pounding as the figure stopped a few steps away, its eyes, if it had them, fixed on him. A cold dread filled the air, and the temperature dropped so sharply that Jonas could see his breath. He waited, camera in hand, for the Watcher to speak, to reveal the secrets of the Starlight Hotel. But the figure remained silent, its stare unyielding. As Jonas reached out tentatively with his recorder, the figure suddenly vanished, as if swallowed by the shadows, leaving him alone in the chilling silence. Shaken but undeterred, Jonas knew this was only the beginning. The secrets of the Starlight Hotel were deep and dark, and he was determined to unearth them all. Yet, as he gathered his equipment and prepared to explore further, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed behind him, retreating deeper into the heart of the hotel. Jonas followed, his resolve hardening with each step. The story of the Starlight Hotel was unraveling, thread by thread, leading him deeper into a labyrinth of whispers and shadows. The further he ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very air was thickening, trying to smother his resolve. Jonas's footsteps were muffled by the thick, aged carpet as he pursued the echo of the retreating footsteps. The hallways of the Starhouse Hotel twisted unexpectedly, hallways branching off into more corridors, creating a maze that disoriented him. He realized he was being led, or herded, towards the hotel's old ballroom, a place renowned in the stories for its grandeur and tragedy. The ballroom doors loomed ahead, their once gilded frames now tarnished by time and neglect. The air grew colder as he approached, a chill that seemed to seep into his very bones. With a deep breath to steel himself, Jonas pushed the doors open. Inside, the ballroom was a cavernous space, grand chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like frozen, spectral teardrops. Their crystals, dulled by decades of dust, still caught the beams of his flashlight and refracted them into ghostly arcs of light. The dance floor, once filled with the laughter and music of countless celebrations, was now silent, the only sounds the soft whisper of his movements and the distant drip of water from a leaking ceiling. Jonas ventured further in, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across faded wall tapestries and portraits of people who had once been the lifeblood of the Starlight Hotel. As he approached the center of the dance floor, the air shifted, growing even colder, and a faint music began to play, a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The sound was mesmerizing, pulling him deeper into the ballroom's heart. There, in the center of the dance floor, stood a grand piano, its keys moving slightly as if touched by invisible hands, playing the melancholic tune. Jonas felt a presence behind him and spun around, his flashlight illuminating the empty room. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing oddly in the vast space. "Show yourself." The music stopped abruptly, and silence crashed down like a wave. Then, as suddenly as it had ceased, the piano keys began to clatter wildly, discordant and loud, as if in panic or warning. Jonas's heart raced, adrenaline surging as he tried to locate the source of the disturbance. His flashlight flickered then, and in the brief moments of darkness, he saw it, silhouettes of people dancing, spinning gracefully across the dance floor, their forms blurry and indistinct. As the light returned, they vanished, leaving Jonas alone once more, standing in the silent, empty ball. Breathing heavily, Jonas felt the weight of the hotel's secrets pressing down on him. He needed to understand the connection between the Watcher, the apparitions, and the tragic history of the hotel. Each piece of the puzzle seemed to slip through his fingers just as he thought he grasped it. Determined to uncover more, Jonas left the ballroom and headed towards the hotel's library, a place mentioned in passing by Nadine as holding many of the original records and journals from the hotel's early days. Perhaps there, among the musty pages and forgotten tales, he would find the answers he sought. The library was on the hotel's lower level, a place seldom visited according to the records. As Jonas descended the staircase to the library, the air grew thick with the smell of mold and old paper. The door creaked ominously as he pushed it open, revealing rows upon rows of bookshelves, their contents shrouded in dust and shadow. He moved through the aisles, his flashlight beam catching on titles that spoke of the hotel's heyday, of celebrations and tragedies alike. Reaching out, he pulled a leather-bound journal from the shelf, the cover cracked and worn. Blowing off a layer of dust, he opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant but faded, the words written by someone who had loved the hotel deeply. As Jonas read, the voice of Albert Starling, the hotel's founder, seemed to echo in the still air, speaking of grand dreams and bitter sorrows. The journal spoke of the Watcher not as a guardian of secrets, but as a protector of the hotel's soul, twisted by grief and bound to the hotel as surely as the walls themselves. Jonas's eyes widened as he pieced together the story. The Watcher was no mere spectre, he was the heart of the hotel, tormented and twisted by the loss and tragedy that had befallen the place. As Jonas read on, the whispers returned, soft and insistent, swirling around him like the remnants of a long-forgotten storm. He needed to reach the end of the journal, to uncover the truth of what had happened, to understand how to free the Watcher and lay the hotel's spirits to rest. But the whispers grew louder, more urgent, as if they were trying to drown out the words Jonas was reading. His flashlight flickered again, casting eerie, dancing shadows between the rows of bookshelves. The temperature in the room dropped, each breath Jonas took materializing as a cloud of vapor in the chilly air. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, his focus returning to the journal as he turned another page. The entries became more frantic, the elegant handwriting deteriorating into an almost illegible scrawl. Albert Starling wrote of strange occurrences, guests reporting visions and cries in the night that went beyond mere hauntings. He wrote of his desperation to protect his beloved hotel and its visitors from the unseen forces that seemed to converge upon the place. Jonas's heart pounded as he read the next entry, dated just a week before the mysterious closure of the hotel. Starling had attempted a ritual, something ancient and forbidden, to bind the malevolent energies to himself, hoping to contain them. The ritual, however, had not gone as planned. Instead of binding the energies, it had amplified them, giving birth to the Watcher, a manifestation of all the sorrow, anger, and despair the hotel had absorbed over the years. As Jonas digested this revelation, a cold hand seemed to press against his back. He spun around, the journal clutched in his hand, and his flashlight swept across the room. Nothing but books and shadows, but the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. Determined to finish what he started, Jonas turned back to the journal, his eyes scanning the pages for any clue on how to undo the ritual. The final entries were the most disturbing. Starling had become a prisoner in his own hotel, tormented by the very force he had tried to control. His last entry was a plea for forgiveness, a hope that someone would one day free the hotel from its endless cycle of suffering. Jonas closed the journal, a plan forming in his mind. He needed to find the site of the original ritual, which, according to the journal, was hidden somewhere in the hotel's basement, a place Starling had converted into a private sanctuary. With the journal in his backpack, Jonas left the library and made his way down to the basement. The air grew colder with each step downward, the oppressive atmosphere thickening. The basement was vast, a labyrinth of storage rooms and forgotten spaces filled with old furniture and hotel memorabilia. Using Starling's vague descriptions from the journal, Jonas searched for the sanctuary. After what felt like hours, his flashlight finally illuminated a heavy wooden door tucked away behind a large armoire in a dusty corner of the basement. The door was locked, but Jonas, fueled by a mixture of desperation and determination, managed to force it open. The room beyond was dark and silent, the air stale with the scent of old incense and wax. At the center of the room stood an altar, covered in arcane symbols and surrounded by blackened candles, their wicks long burned down. Jonas approached the altar, his flashlight revealing a circle of salt around it, disturbed in one area where it looked like something or someone had broken through. On the altar itself lay a collection of objects, a silver dagger, a book of esoteric rites, and a series of handwritten notes that appeared to be instructions for the ritual. With trembling hands, Jonas gathered the notes, reading through them quickly. They detailed a counter-ritual, something designed to reverse the original binding and release the Watcher from its torment. The process was complex, requiring precise timing and recitation of incantations, but Jonas knew it was the hotel's only chance for peace. As he prepared to perform the counter-ritual, the whispers returned, louder than before, a cacophony of voices that filled the room with dread. Jonas's heart raced as he began to recite the incantations, his voice echoing in the claustrophobic space. Outside the sanctuary, the shadows deepened, gathering their strength as if preparing to intervene. Jonas could feel their malice pressing against the door, the salt circled his only protection as he continued the ritual, each word a defiant shout against the darkness. As he reached the climax of the ritual, the air in the room shimmered, reality bending and twisting in ways that defied explanation. The whispers turned into screams, the shadows clawing at the edges of the salt circle, desperate to stop him. Jonas spoke the final word of the ritual, a name that Starling had written with a trembling hand, the key to unlocking and releasing the bound energies. The room fell silent, oppressively silent, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the air began to lighten, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Jonas felt the presence of the Watcher recede, its malevolent force dissipating as the ritual took effect. The shadows retreated, melting away into the corners of the room, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief. Breathing heavily, Jonas slumped to the floor, exhausted from the effort of the ritual. His body was heavy, his mind a whirl of emotions, relief, disbelief, and a lingering sense of dread. He waited in the silence, half expecting the darkness to surge back with even greater ferocity. But the calm persisted, and the oppressive weight that had haunted the Starlight Hotel seemed, at long last, to have lifted. He stood, his legs shaky, and made his way back through the basement's labyrinth, the once stifling darkness now just ordinary shadows cast by his flashlight. Each step felt lighter, the air around him clearer, as if the hotel itself had taken a deep, cleansing breath. Emerging from the basement, Jonas noticed a change in the hotel. The air was no longer thick with despair. The shadows no longer whispered threats. It was just an old building now, its halls echoing with the memory of footsteps rather than cries of the tormented. As he walked through the lobby, Jonas felt a profound sense of completion. He had come to the Starlight Hotel seeking a story, but he had found much more, a deep, hidden truth that had demanded to be released. He knew he would write about his experiences, but in a way that honored the history and pain of the place, not merely as a tale of ghostly horror. Before leaving, he took one last look around. The hotel was no longer a prison of paranormal malevolence, but a monument to the resilience of those who had suffered there. It deserved to be remembered, not as a house of horrors, but as a site of significant emotional and historical depth. With his camera and recorder packed away, Jonas stepped out into the early morning light. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over Eldritch Falls. The town, like the hotel, seemed to be waking from a long, troubled sleep. As he drove away, Jonas glanced in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see the dark silhouette of the hotel looming over him. But there was only the road and the rising sun. The shadows of the Starlight Hotel and its watcher were finally at peace. The experience at the Starlight Hotel changed Jonas. He continued his work as a journalist, but with a new perspective on the stories he pursued. He sought depth in the places he visited, looking for the underlying truths hidden within tales of the paranormal and supernatural. His time at the hotel had taught him that every story, especially the dark and frightening ones, had layers that deserved to be understood and respected. Jonas's article about the Starlight Hotel would go on to be published in a major magazine, celebrated for its thoughtful approach to the paranormal investigation. It was a testament to the power of understanding and compassion in facing the unknown. And though he would travel to many other haunted locations, write numerous articles, and speak at conferences, Jonas would never forget the Starline Hotel and the night he confronted its darkest secrets. It remained with him, a reminder that behind every shadow, there is a story waiting to be told, and sometimes a soul waiting to be set free. The road stretched out before Jonas as he drove away from Eldritch Falls, the rearview mirror reflecting the shrinking image of the Starlight Hotel. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across the landscape, a feeling of accomplishment mixed with an unshakable eeriness settled within him. He had faced the unknown, tangled with forces beyond normal comprehension, and emerged not only unscathed, but with a deeper understanding of the spectral world. His thoughts drifted back to the Starlight Hotel, to the cold, dark corners of its halls, and the desperate cries of its long-suffering spectre. He pondered the souls that had passed through its doors, each leaving a mark, a memory in the very fabric of the building. Jonas realized that while he had managed to bring peace to the place, the stories of those souls would linger, whispered in the quiet moments between the ticking of a clock or the creaking of floorboards. As Jonas continued his drive, the landscape shifted from the shadowed valleys of Eldritch Falls to the bustling highways leading towards the city. The transition felt symbolic, a return from the world of shadows to the world of light. Yet, the shadows of the Starlight Hotel clung to the edges of his mind, a haunting melody that would not be silenced. He decided to make one last stop before returning home, a small, hilltop cemetery that overlooked Eldridge Falls. It was here, according to local lore, that many of the hotel's guests, and perhaps even the watcher himself, were laid to rest. Jonas walked among the tombstones, each etched with names and dates, whispers of lives once lived. He stopped at a particularly old grave, its inscription worn but still legible. The name on the stone was Albert Starling, the founder of the Starlight Hotel. Jonas stood there for a long moment, paying his respects to the man whose dream had built the hotel and whose actions had bound him to it in death. He spoke softly, his words carried away by the wind. "Your watch has ended, Mr. Starling. Rest now, in peace." The wind seemed to sigh in response, the leaves rustling in a hushed chorus. As Jonas walked back to his car, he felt a lightness, as if the acknowledgement of Starling's grave had lifted a final weight from both his and the hotel's spirits. The drive home was quiet, contemplative. Jonas knew that his article would tell a story of haunting and redemption, of darkness faced and light restored. But beyond the printed words, he would carry the true story within him, a story of human emotions, of pain, longing, and ultimately, release. When the Starlight Hotel article was published, it was met with acclaim and curiosity. Readers were captivated not only by the chilling tale but by the profound human element that Jonas had woven into the narrative. His phone rang with offers for interviews and talks, his inbox filled with letters from people moved by the story. But for Jonas, the greatest reward was a letter from an old woman who had once worked at the hotel, thanking him for bringing peace to a place haunted by so much sorrow. She wrote of nights spent listening to the cries of the watcher, of the relief she now felt knowing that the hotel's dark past had been acknowledged and settled. Jonas kept that letter in his desk drawer, a humble reminder of why he did what he did. For him, journalism was more than uncovering truths. It was about understanding the human condition, about bringing light to the darkest of places. And so, Jonas continued to write, to explore, but the story of the Starlight Hotel remained his most profound encounter. It was a reminder that behind every shadow, there is a story of a soul, and sometimes, those souls just need to be heard. As the years passed, the Starlight Hotel faded into obscurity, its halls quiet, its rooms empty. But the stories lived on, whispered on the wind, forever a part of Eldridge Falls' haunted history.